I'll do one and then I'll give you guys some time to kind of plug away, okay? So you can think of the squares and triangles as just letters, okay, variables that you're trying to solve for. There's no difference, right? If it's a fire or an umbrella or a drink or whatever it is, right? They're just something. They stand for something, and you're just going to try and solve for them, like the pictures, right? So there's nothing stopping you if for the first few that you want to try, there's nothing wrong with writing this 2 squares plus 4 triangles is equal to 14. And that'll be like your first equation, right? And then your second equation could be, okay, well, 1 square plus a triangle has to equal 5. That could be your second equation. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the steps that I showed you above, and you're just going to you're going to follow them. Okay, you can do this question the exact same way. Again, what I was saying earlier when we looked at these, I don't want to draw these pictures all the time, nor do you want to draw squares and triangles all the time, because that's getting annoying, right? But for the first few, it might help you, which is why we use the variable. Look how quick it is to write the variables. It's easy, right? But don't think of the variables as something more complicated than the pictures, right? They're just something that you're going to solve for. That's it. Okay, so I can do this question with the squares and triangles, and then, or not. It's up to you guys, and if anybody opposes. Okay, but this is all that's going on. So if I rearrange, right, for a square or a triangle, it doesn't matter. We can arrange for the triangle too. Again, I don't really want to do. I want to deal with the one that's easiest, right? Step 1 said find the easiest one, right? In this case, again, I think it's the second one. This looks a lot easier than the top equation. So we're going to just try and solve for one of the variables in those 2 equations, right? So all I got to do is take the second equation and solve for a square or a triangle. So if I do that, this will be, I'll number the steps. So let's just solve for, I don't know, a triangle this time instead. Okay, a square plus a triangle has to equal 5. That's the question. But if I want to get the triangle by itself, then I'm going to take the square and move it to the other side. And to do that, I need to subtract it from both sides, right? So a triangle has to equal 5 minus a square. You got to put a box around that. And you'll remember from the last question, we came back to that, right? So it's worth putting a box around. It's worth making a good note of it, okay? Because we're going to come back to that at the end, and it's important. Sometimes you forget that that's sitting there right in front of you. And you're like, okay, well, I found one of the shapes. Ultimately, we're going to find the square, right? But then it's very easy to forget about the fact that you have an equation sitting here, like it's telling you what one triangle is equal to, right? So if you find what the square is, you just throw it in there and it's done, right? So step 2 is, if we look at the first equation, okay, so this top one, I now know, or we'll look over here, okay, I now know what the triangle is, because I just found it, I just wrote it out, right? It's 5 minus a square. So I'm just going to rewrite the first equation, and instead of writing that triangle in there, I'm just going to write the piece on the right side, right? So step 2 is rewrite the first equation. So I get 2 squares plus 4 triangles, but the triangle, remember, is not a triangle. It's 5 minus squares. 5 minus 1 square. Okay? And that whole thing has to equal 14. Okay? And step 3 is just start doing some math, right? So, by that I mean, you're going to try and like work your way down to a point where you get like a square is equal to something is the math piece, right? You know, it might take you 3 or 4 lines, right? So we're going to go, okay, well, 2 square, and then I'm just going to do the 2 red pieces, right, that I've drawn there, the distribution or the table method, right? 20 minus 4 squares has to equal 14. Okay, this is from 4 times 5 is 20, and the 4 times a negative square is minus 4 squares. That's where that came from. The 2 square just carried down, and the 14 just carried down. So all I've done is expanded out the bracket, or gotten rid of those brackets. Okay. So then we're just gonna try and get a square, or like figure out how to get the squares on one side and the numbers on the other, right? So it looks like the 2 squares are on the left already, so that's kind of easy for you, right? You don't have any work to do. But what I'll do is I'll take the number, that'll be positive 20, and I need to get it to the other side. And to do that, if it's positive on one side, it needs to become negative on the other, or subtract 20 from both sides. Okay, and so you're going to be left with, after you do that, you're going to get 2 squares minus 4 squares has to equal 14 minus 20. And then you just do the math. Right, so you go to your calculator, you go 2 minus 4, negative 2. Negative 2 squares has to equal 14 minus 20, negative 6. Okay, so we still don't have the square by itself. So you're going to get the square by itself, and to do that, I've got to divide both sides by negative 2. Okay. The negative 2's cancel. You're left with 1 square has to equal negative 6 divided by negative 2. It's 3. The 2 negatives cancel, so 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, we found what one of the shapes was. I still want to find out the second one, and that's where we get to go back to the box that we drew, right? Where we said one triangle was 5 minus a square. So a triangle is equal to 5 minus a square. So a triangle has to equal 5 minus 3, because a square, I took the value of 3 from being the square, and I substituted it in for the square. So one triangle is equal to 2. Any crazy, like, did I do any like weird stuff there for anybody? Again, like, honestly, it's the same 5 steps every single time with these questions. The only thing that'll get a bit harder is like if I'm not so nice with some of these equations, right? Which you can maybe see some of these bottom ones aren't so nice, or not as nice, I would say. They're not bad though. Okay, so I don't know. I think the major issue with this is a little bit of a harder concept to grasp, but I think I've broken it down in a way for you guys to kind of like at least start to work with it. And it might take you 10 questions. If you do 10 questions, it's the exact same steps every single time. It's the same 5 steps. So it's very clear, it becomes very clear as like how many questions you have done, okay? Because it's not like, it is hard. This is a hard concept, okay? But if you do 10 of them, maybe it's 15. It might vary from student to student, right? But I promise you it's the same 5 steps. You just get used to a routine of doing this, and the more of them you do, the easier it becomes. Right? You just get into the habit of doing it, right? Let me do number 2, And I'll do number 2 without doing all the squares and triangles this time. Okay. And you'll see, okay, well, it'll save you a little bit of time without having to draw these shapes, because the shapes get a bit annoying to draw, actually, especially neat, which you can see gets sloppier and sloppier as I go down the page there. Okay. So let's apply the same 5 steps to this question, except this time we're going to solve for x and y instead of squares and triangles. Okay. So I have 2 equations again, 1 and 2. Step 1 always says solve for one of the variables in terms of the other in the easier of the 2 equations. So again, I'm looking at the 2 equations that I see in number 2 here, and I see that number 2 looks pretty easy relative to number 1. Right? So I'm going to solve for x in this one. So I'm going to take step 1, x plus y has to equal 6. I'm going to get x by itself, and to do that I'm going to subtract the y from both sides. X equals 6 minus y. Alright, I'm going to put a box around that because I'm going to come back to it the same way I came back to it over here. Right? From there, I make the substitution of what 1x is equal to into the first equation. So I'm going to rewrite the first equation. Okay, there's the first equation. I haven't changed anything. I just rewrote it. Now, right above it, you can see 1x is equal to this 6 minus y piece. So why don't you take the fact that the x is purple and turn it into blue, because purple is equal to blue. Right? So you're just going to rewrite it now. 6 minus y plus 3y is equal to 10. Step 3 is figure out or get the letters on one side and the numbers on the other, right? The variables on one and the numbers on the other, right? So I see the positive 6 on the left. That's kind of annoying, right? That's positive. So I'm going to take it and move it to the other side. And when I do that, subtract 6, and I'm left. I'm just going to rewrite the line here, but this time without the negative 6 there, or the positive 6. And then you just do the math. Right? Negative 1y plus 3y is going to be 2y. 10 minus 6 is 4. Remember, another word for this is from before the break. Step 3 is, I suppose, okay, collecting like terms, right? Or sorting out from our base 10 materials. We had like the little cubes and then the rods of 10. We were sorting them out. Remember, I had you guys organize that on your desk the one day, right? And then once you're here, you're just going to tell me what 1y is equal to. You're going to solve for y. Solve for y means get it by itself. Divide both sides by 2. Y is equal to 2. Okay? We're still not done because we got to figure out what x and y are. Well, you found y, so that's only half the puzzle. You got to find the other one too. X. Okay? So x equals, we're going to bring this equation that I put the box on. I'm going to put it down here. X is equal to 6 minus y. X is equal to 6 minus, what's y equal to? 2. So x is equal to 2. Oh, sorry, 4. That's it. You see how, like, the process is starting. So the more of these that you do, your answers will get more and more condensed, right? You see how, like, how annoying this was to have to write this all the time. And you see it got a little bit more condensed when I didn't have to write the steps. And then when I didn't have to draw the shapes, it got even more condensed, right? So you're gonna work towards streamlining this 5-step process. And the way you're gonna do that is just like with questions, right? Okay, so let's I'll stop the recording here. I'll give you guys a chance to work on the last 2 questions, and then maybe with, I don't know, I'll give you 10 minutes or something like that. Okay, you can ask questions in the chat or whatever, right? And then maybe in the last 5 minutes I can do one, okay? For both of them.